Hi everyone, I'm Ivan. I'm part of Aragon, and I'm going to talk about governance and tokenomics and what's happening at the intersection of it, and why do we have tokens and what can we do with them. So what's Aragon? We've been building governance since 2014. Our code base is securing over 40 billion on chain. Lido, Curve are like some of the biggest users of that infrastructure since way back when. We're the only integrated solutions provider that does like contracts, backend, and UI for governance. And over the past 18 months, we've done a lot of token-centric, like tokenomics, incentive alignment that goes just beyond governance. So every DAO has a token at some point. A lot of DAOs get launched because there is a token. So just briefly tokens and why we've issued them and what's coming next. So 2013, everybody was like forking Bitcoin, changing a few parameters, and it was like money was the use case. Like the token was going to be money. That's why we launched, I don't know, thousands of tokens. Litecoin is like one of those that is still kind of around. Dogecoin as well, like both iterations of Bitcoin. Then 2017, we had like the token is going to be like utility, and one of the main things that stuck as utility was method of payment. I'm gonna set up a lemon stand, and you're gonna be bringing in Dogecoin or Lemon Coin. It was a very funny ad, and that didn't really work out. The concept didn't make a lot of sense, but also like technology adoption wasn't there. 2019 rolls around, like the idea of governance tokens gets anchored. A lot of projects started forking Compound. It was like one of the earlier airdrops. At the time, it was called liquidity mining. And as with a lot of things, when there's something is successful, people just like blindly fork it. They don't think about iterations too much. So we've been dealing with that sort of use case for tokens for quite a while. 2024, the meme coins thing exploded. And one of the interesting implications there was people actually realized a lot of governance tokens are, in essence, a meme coin, right? Because you actually don't have any value accrual. You don't have any actual control over the protocol or its capital flows on chain, which makes it a meme coin with extra steps. And like people were kind of despaired by this. I'm actually pumped because I'm like, okay, like this is a very clear sort of like stage gate that is going to push some teams to do better, and others will just like keep doing the meme coins. Another Ivan from Gearbox, he had like a very cool blog post about like the sort of the fork in the industry, where like there are teams that are building something like actually meaningful, and teams that are just like, we're going to launch a coin and see what happens. So I'm excited about the future of tokens. So with that in mind, like capital formation will remain the core of why we mint tokens. That's not a bad thing. I think tokens are a very flexible way to align incentives across stakeholders for emerging technology and product companies. But like, what happens afterwards, right? Like, this is going to be why people launch the token. But how are you going to like leverage that beyond the initial distribution? So, one of the problems with most governance tokens today, people are given decision-making power. Sometimes real, sometimes not. The problem is, everybody's kind of pulling in their own direction because there isn't like a single Schelling point for everyone to align around, right? So it's like, it's a very common problem in traditional corporate governance. It's like minority investor protection, like the principal agent problem, where you give someone decision-making power and they have no skin in the game, and then they just like pull towards like, oh, like, I'm contributing to this DAO. I'm not getting paid. I don't have any tokens, but I'm going to land the service contract, and like that's how I'm going to get my money. Clearly, incentives kind of suck. So why do we do tokenomics? Charlie Munger had a very famous quote, which is why I had the Berkshire Hathaway reference earlier. Show me the incentives, and I'll show you the outcome. So in essence, people would very rarely go against their financial incentives. And that means that we need to figure out ways to align those incentives, and the token is, if well designed, the perfect vehicle to do so. I don't have a timer. I don't know, maybe I'm going a bit too fast. But this will give us time for Q&A. So there are sort of two symbiotic objectives for tokens. On one side, you want to align incentives. You have different stakeholders. You have developers. You have financiers, whether those are people that invested in your seed round or those are people that are going to inject liquidity into the protocol. There are different user categories. So you want sort of all of them to have skin in the game in the network that you're building. And on the other side, you want to build capture-resistant networks. The challenge is over the past few years, we've focused so much on building capture-resistant networks. The thing, though, is if you don't build anything valuable, nobody's going to come and try to capture it, right? The reality of it is capture resistance matters at scale, right? If you have, I don't know, if you're managing $5,000, probably an Excel table would suffice because you have enough social layer cohesion between the members that you're not going to rug your friends for a few $1,000s. If it's a few billion, things start to look very differently, and then that's when capture resistance really matters. And before we hyperfixate on the capture resistance element, we need to make sure that there is enough alignment in an ecosystem so that you actually build something worth capturing and worth defending. So tokens should be ownership. A few months ago, there was this meme of founder mode. And the thing is, if you don't give people skin in the game, you end up with sort of a loose community of Discord members that are sort of contributors. You don't need a loose community. You need fanatics. A small community of fanatics would outperform a massive community of people that sort of don't care. And what does ownership mean? Ownership, in my definition, it has two key components. It's control over outcomes, which is the direct on-chain implications of decision-making power. Whether you have control over code or capital, you do have control over the outcome. And then the second crucial element is you have to have skin in the game, or you have to be able to benefit from the success of the shared endeavor. So this is not a silver bullet. I'm going to talk about VE because it's the best established model for incentive alignment that we have today. It was pioneered by Curve, and we had a chat with Michael a few months back, and this is a direct quote. It's good at aligning incentives, but that doesn't solve your problem if you're not having a solid fundamental business underneath. And thankfully, a lot more protocols and product teams in the industry are starting to think of okay, I'm building a business. Yes, maybe there is a public goods aspect to it, but ultimately, anything that needs to be sustainable and that hopefully aspires for longevity requires financial sustainability. So you need to create value, and you need to capture and accrue some of it to the people that create it so they keep contributing. So at a very simple scale, how you can help accrue value into a token and align incentives through a VE system. You have, I don't have a pointer. Do I have a pointer? I have a pointer. OK, cool. So such a system usually has a staker contract where you can park the native liquidity the native token. It's useful because it helps you manage the liquidity of how much tokens are out in circulation. It also allows you to introduce a time multiplier that basically gives more decision-making power to token holders that show a long-term commitment. And that's really powerful. Like there are teams in the industry that source some of their best talent from their community because like you lock in for 4 years your tokens, and you kind of like are stuck with that community. And with enough skin in the game, you care a lot, and you contribute, you surface talent. It's a powerful way of making zealots. And then how do you like actually make sure that the value accrues to that token? So people have like short commitment, they've foregone liquidity. Well, in traditional finance, there is this concept of like productive assets and discounted cash flows. And so if you give token holders direct control over resource allocations and capital flows, you turn the token into a productive asset. You also can give them, control over protocol parameters and governance upgrades. I'm going to get into that in a sec. But I'm going to focus first on the resource allocation bit. So how could that work? OK, so we have the token locked here. Token holders are committed for a certain time frame. Maybe they get a bonus if they commit for longer. That network has a shared resource, right? So it can be treasury allocation. It can be inflation. If you're fortunate enough to have like hit product market fit and you're like already creating value, you maybe are capturing some of it. It can be protocol fees. So a client we're working with, they're like, OK, well, we're generating protocol fees. We want to make sure that value accrues to the token holders, and also they are actively engaged into the decision-making of how do we use that shared resource, right? We want to give them actual control. So because these people are like locked in, quite literally, they have an interest in the prosperity and the longevity of the protocol. So they will have an incentive to do like better allocation decisions. Such a system makes it easier for them to make allocation decisions because you have a defined decision surface, right? So you're saying, like, here are some examples of like, OK, we want to spend on growth, we want to spend on core ops, we want to sell by the native token, we want to do validator rewards, we want to reward VE holders, so like just pay ourselves, basically. But the important element here is you're defining like what we fund as a separate question than like how we fund it and who do we fund with it, right? Because a lot of proposals, if you're involved in DAOs, like a lot of proposals like just fall through because like it's like, oh, like this service provider is offering this and it's like a good thing, but like a bunch of other service providers they actually want to take that contract, and you end up with like you're either end up not funding something or overfunding it because there are like 3 teams that each one of them is getting money to fund the same thing. This is causing a lot of like deadlock situations. Another interesting element here is because you have a constrained set of alternatives, this sort of system makes a much better prompt if you want to use AI. I'm not bearish on AI governance, but if you want to do that, this gives you a clean prompt because it's like I want to optimize for like protocol daily users 3 years from now. Here are the options of how I can spend resources today. Like, help me make the best decision. It's a cleaner prompt than like, should I fund this or not, right? Because like, should I fund this or not doesn't tell you what the alternative paths are. Another benefit of like having a constrained set of alternatives is that this enforces fiscal discipline, right? Like, so the shared resource is being reallocated every 2 weeks. That's like the standard. It's something that Curve started with, and then like everybody gets sort of like like building on, like sticking to the same time frame. Also, like a lot of engineering sprints are 2 weeks, so it makes sense. So I know that there's 100% of protocol fees that I'm going to distribute every 2 weeks. If I want to spend more on something, it means spending less on something else. So you're not going to end up in a situation where you've spent all your budget by July, and then the rest of the year, everybody's like, what the fuck do we do now? We have no money left. So this improves fiscal discipline. And then one of the like, OK, it makes voting convenient because you can make it sticky. So basically, if I say like, oh, I think we should invest in growth, like at this stage of the protocol development, investing in growth makes sense. I invest once. My vote can stick there until I change my preference. So I don't have to go in and revote every 2 weeks. It just stays there. But one of the most important things for me personally is that this gives minority participants actual voice, and it creates value for them as well. So if you think about it in a conventional proposal, you have like yes/no decision, right? If I have 3% of the network and somebody else has 4, if I want a proposal to pass, I vote yes. The person with the 4% votes no. So basically, they have 100% decision-making power, I have 0, right? With a gauge system, because you control proportionate share of the shared resource, it means if I believe we should be spending on growth and I have 3% of the network, even if everyone else votes for the other stuff, 3% of the resource is going to go there. So my minority participation still matters. This has worked really well recently in like igniting growth flywheels. I think this is the Aragon example. So basically, as you know, like every protocol issues sort of rewards here to like reward some sort of behavior that brings. So in this case, depositing tokens into LP positions to improve the liquidity on the AMM. This creates better UX, distracts users, they pay fees, revenue gets redistributed. And the element here that is important, which is like how you kickstart. So the green thing is like the flywheel, right? Like the yellow part is how you sort of kickstart it. So you initially like reward some of the, you reward LPing with some tokens. The thing is, because the token actually is a useful way to control shared resources, not all of it is going to hit the market, right? Like we've been through DeFi summer, crazy APYs, and then just like everybody's just like selling the token as soon as it hits their wallet, right? Because you can't do anything with it. It makes no sense to hold it, right? But because here the token actually has like real tangible ownership properties, this means that some of the rewards are going to get locked, which as a protocol, it decreases your cost, right? Because you basically like float fewer, like less new tokens onto the market, and like that sort of helps your like market dynamics of the price of the token. So Aragon specifically, we can see that like although that their emissions are going down over time, volume on the exchange keeps growing. So they've successfully kickstarted the flywheel. Some of the other like use cases that I believe are like an important way of empowering both teams and token holders is to design better processes that for like product development. So for example, this is an optimistic flow. It's inspired by Lido. But we kind of productized it. And the idea here is, so we had the staking locking. I mean, OK, let's go back for a sec. So here, right, we have staking locking. We spoke about resource allocation. There's like protocol parameters, for example. So basically, token holders, they usually don't have enough context to actually proactively create proposals and suggest good implementations. The thing is, like, most protocols where you're told, like, oh, token holders can come in and anyone can come in and create a proposal. There are like 15 different multisigs that are security councils and whatnot. And like that proposal ain't going through unless it gets greenlit by the core team or some like selected group of stakeholders. So we're like, it's a waste of collective attention, right? Because like ultimately there is a selected group of people that have sufficient context to actually make good decisions and create good proposals, and like those proposals go through audits and blah 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 to make sure that the system doesn't get attacked. And that is usually members of the core team or close, like how do you call it, constellation around them, right? So what we've done is, okay, so you take this like team multisig or like security council. They're the ones that are creating the proposals, and then token holders hold the ultimate actual power. So this is like hard power over what actually happens, because there's a time lock, and then if they disagree with a protocol upgrade, they can just block that, right? So they don't need to come up with proposals, but they still hold the ultimate power over the protocol. This empowers the core team to like be faster at shipping, and it creates this like good balance between capture resistance and speed of execution. Because as we know in this space, like things move very fast. If you struggle to like align people around like, oh, we want to upgrade our protocol, and then by the time you gather like stakeholder alignment around like, okay, well, can we pass quorum? Somebody else has forked the code and is like vampiring your TVL. So how does all of this come together to like build better systems and projects and products? So we have token holders here. They've shown commitment. They've locked their tokens for a certain time frame. And then by leveraging OSX, I have to say it. So our core protocol basically allows teams to have like very granular permission management and access control system, which basically means that for every type of decision, so for every yellow box, you can define, in essence, an arbitrarily complex decision path. But you can isolate that. So instead of having like, okay, this is the proposal flow, and like everything goes through this, you can basically say like, oh, for this sort of decision, so for example, if you want to do a governance upgrade, which is like how this whole fucking thing works, right? So it's like, okay, token holders are the ones that can create a proposal, but sure, they create a proposal, but then there are two time locks. There is like a security council, which is like, okay, is this malicious? Is there stuff in the code that shouldn't be there? And maybe for some projects it's important. You have like also some legal wrapper that can also exercise veto power to block this, right? Let's be real, like normie land and meat space has impact on how we do things. So like you can design this flow, but this flow is pretty heavy. Like speed is not what you go for here. You want like this sort of change to be slow, right? So that's why you design this process. Here, for like upgrading the product or like changing protocol parameters, maybe you want like a faster sort of path. So you design a different process where, as I said, like what I showed in detail before, team multisig creates a proposal, stakeholders can veto if they disagree with. This looks simple, but surprisingly, like very few organizations have implemented such systems. Like one of the most striking examples is from a couple of years ago. Cosmos had, like at the same time, they're running the entire, like the most important protocol upgrade for the IBC, and a guy is asking for $5,000 to create YouTube videos. And like those two proposals go in parallel through the same flow. They're competing for the attention of the people that are making decisions simultaneously, which makes no sense, right? Because like the implications of those two decisions are at like drastically different scales. So the ability to actually like design granular specific paths depending on how impactful a decision is, or like who, like which are the stakeholders that have. Side note: to make good decisions, there are three things that are required. So you need to have incentive alignment, you need to have skill, and you need to have context. Right? So very often, it's sort of like, oh, like there are delegates in the system. They maybe have like context because they're like all the time in the forum. Thing is, maybe there is a skill issue because they're not developers. They can't review the protocol, or they have no skin in the game. Right? Those three elements need to be there. And when you can design granular decision paths for each type of decision, you can think through like, okay, who should participate in this decision because they have incentive alignment, they have domain knowledge, and they have sufficient context on the situation that your product protocol is in. That's it. I mean, ultimately, the goal is to build something worth owning, and hopefully, with the ability to be more deliberate about how your product or protocol makes collective decisions, will help you get there. Thank you. I have no idea how we're doing on time. I don't know if we have time for questions. OK, cool. Yeah, let's go.
I see you presenting Vnomics as something positive. I agree that partially, but there is a counter-argument of the incentive for bribing that comes with it. You see that as an issue, or good bribing is good incentive alignment?
Bribing happens in all walks of life, always. So you can sort of like ignore it, or you can recognize it and potentially leverage it, right? So it can be viewed as a bug or as a feature. I'd like to think of it as a feature, because we've seen this. Like, we've been in forums, we see that, like we actually, there's also like a very, very interesting element, which is like self-censorship bribing. So a few years ago, we built, for nouns, we were building like a private voting implementation, because the challenge that they faced is like, bad decisions go through because people were afraid to speak up against them. Because it's sort of like, if I block your decision, if I block your proposal to get 400K to finger paint a noun on a Brooklyn wall, when I come in with my proposal, you're going to block me, right? So it's like, there is this tit for tat. And it's like, sure, with tokenomics, maybe bribing is a bit more streamlined, but like at least everybody can participate. It's a more, I would argue it's a more inclusive way of bribery, right? Because if you choose to layer such an element to your system, at least the rules are very clear. You know how much people are paying for it. You know who's like auctioning their voting power for bribes. So you know how much is available for bribes. Instead of like, going in a bunch of DMs and like group chats and being like, yo, like, we're friends, right? You're gonna vote for me. Which is what happens in every DAO that is critical of bribes today. Or at least, like, maybe every is a bit of a harsh generalization, but like in most organizations, this is what happens.
Yeah, my question about, so there is a popular take on Twitter that DAOs would actually benefit more if they would way more privacy oriented. They don't need to be that transparent, maybe, to different extent. What's your take on this? The tech is already there, and I believe you were working as Aragon with nouns and Aztec on something similar to it, and Vitalik recently told that, well, this might be actually a good idea.
Yeah, I think I think there are different stakeholders. I think there is such an extreme push for transparency and what I call pseudo accountability, because like posting something in a forum doesn't make you accountable, because there is no actual value accrual, right? Like, if I hold a token that is intrinsically worthless, because there is no way for me to benefit from the growth of the system, right? Like, I'm very interested of like exactly how the money is being spent and who is taking like chips off the table, and like people get obsessive about this, right? If I know, like, oh, like there is this like very clear path of like this network grow, it's successful, my stake in the network is going to be appreciating because of. Like, I think that would release a lot of the pressure, and it's a lot of wasted effort, to be honest, because it's like, oh, the team is gonna like throw a bunch of data at ChatGPT to create a report, and then like the token holders are gonna like throw the report into ChatGPT to get the key insights out, because there is this like almost like a fetishization of like, let's write the longest, most elaborate report on like what we've done. And it's not a problem only with DAOs, right? Like, if you've ever gotten EU funding for anything, you know that there is this dissemination of information, which is 0.6 from the things that you need to deliver, and like a lot of the money actually goes into like telling people what you've done instead of like actually doing it, which is colossal waste of human talent and capital. So hopefully, when there is like more guarantees for the people that back an endeavor with capital, whether that's like personal effort or financial resources, if they have like more clarity on how the success of this endeavor will benefit them, like the onus of like how much transparency should be available on fund spending and decision making is going to go down. And that would give teams more freedom to like move fast, break things. I mean, ultimately, it's like we are doing like, we're building in public startups, and like startups fail a lot. They pivot a lot. They do stupid stuff. They pivot back to the original things. And like all of that is out in the open. It creates tension because there is no value alignment. Okay, awesome. Thank you for the good questions. And yeah, find us on socials.